Admiral Jack Morrison stood alone in the Pentagon briefing room and stared at the holographic message floating in front of him. The blue light made his tired face look even older than his 58 years. He had read the message 20 times already, but still could not believe what it said. The Galactic Council wanted to test Earth's military. They wanted to see if humans were good enough to join them in space. 3 days had passed since the message arrived. 3 days of endless meetings and arguments. 3 days of fear and hope mixing together in a way that made Morrison's stomach hurt. He pressed a button on the wall and the holographic message played again. A strange alien face appeared in the air. It had too many eyes and spoke in a voice that sounded like metal scraping against stone. The translation software turned its words into English. Greetings to the government of Earth. We are the Galactic Council. We represent 47 civilizations across this galaxy. For 100 years we have watched your world. You have developed faster than we expected. You have reached beyond your planet. You have begun to touch the stars. Now we must decide if you are ready to join us. Morrison watched as the alien's face became serious. The next part always made his heart beat faster. But there is a problem. The galaxy is not always peaceful. There are dangers in the dark spaces between stars. Every member of the council must be able to defend not just themselves, but all of us. Your military must prove it can meet our standards. You have 1 month to prepare a demonstration. We will send observers to watch and judge. If you pass our evaluation, Earth will be welcomed into the galactic community. If you fail, your species will remain locked inside your solar system for another century. The choice is yours. The message ended and the room became dark again. Morrison rubbed his eyes and thought about what this meant. 1 month to prove that humanity deserved a place among the stars. 1 month to show aliens who had been traveling space for thousands of years that Earth's military was good enough. The door opened behind him, and Captain Nicole Hayes walked in. She was 34 years old and one of the smartest tactical officers Morrison had ever known. She carried a tablet computer and looked as tired as he felt. "Admiral, the President is ready for the emergency meeting," she said. "All the Joint Chiefs are already there." Morrison nodded and followed her through the long hallways of the Pentagon. They walked past offices where people were working late into the night. Everyone knew something big was happening. The whole building felt tense, like a rope pulled too tight. The meeting room was full of the most powerful military leaders in America. President Daniel Garrett sat at the head of the table. He was a former Navy officer himself and understood what this opportunity meant. General Kevin Parks from the Air Force was there, along with Admiral Lisa Crawford from the Navy. Colonel Ryan Bennett represented the Marines. There were others too, all looking worried and excited at the same time. "All right, everyone," President Garrett said as Morrison sat down. "We all know why we are here. The aliens are coming in 4 weeks to judge us. We need to show them what we can do." "Ideas?" General Parks spoke first. He was an old fighter pilot who believed air power won wars. "We should showcase our new plasma jets. The X-49 program has produced the fastest aircraft ever built. Nothing in our record suggests the aliens have seen anything like our atmospheric combat capabilities." Admiral Crawford shook her head. "Too limited. We need to show space capability. Our railgun destroyers can fire projectiles at incredible speeds. The kinetic energy alone would impress them. We should demonstrate a naval engagement scenario." Colonel Bennett leaned forward with his arms crossed. "Neither of those show real combat. War is won on the ground. We should let them watch our Marines in action. Close quarters battle. Urban warfare. The stuff that actually matters when you need to take and hold territory." The argument went back and forth for almost an hour. Everyone had different ideas about what would impress the aliens most. Morrison listened but said nothing. He was waiting to hear from someone else. Finally, a young officer at the end of the table raised her hand. Commander Amanda Price was only 29 years old. She worked for Space Force and most of the older officers did not take her seriously yet. But Morrison had read her reports and knew she was special. "Yes, Commander Price?" President Garrett said. Amanda stood up and looked nervous but determined. "Sir, I have been studying everything we know about the Galactic Council. I have read every report about their military operations. I have analyzed their combat records and tactical procedures. And I noticed something important." Everyone in the room turned to look at her. She took a deep breath and continued. "They all fight the same way. Every single alien species in the Council follows rigid hierarchical combat doctrines. Their tactics are predictable. They arrange their fleets in standard formations. They advance their ground troops in straight lines. They rely on their natural advantages like strength or speed or advanced technology. But they never improvise. They never adapt once a battle starts. They never do anything unexpected, General Parks frowned. What are you saying, Commander? I am saying that we should not try to match their strengths. We should show them our strength. The thing that makes human warfare different from everything else in the galaxy. We should demonstrate organized chaos and adaptive improvisation. The room went quiet. Morrison felt a smile starting on his face. This was exactly what he had been hoping someone would say. Admiral Crawford looked confused. Organized chaos? That sounds like a contradiction. Amanda shook her head. It is not, ma'am. Think about every major military victory in human history. We win because we adapt. We win because we improvise. We win because we refuse to fight fair. We find weaknesses and exploit them. We use terrain and psychology and deception. We turn our disadvantages into advantages. No other species does that because they never needed to. They evolved to be stronger or faster or smarter than their enemies. But humans evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill us. We learned to survive by being unpredictable. Morrison stood up and everyone looked at him. Commander Price is right. We cannot beat the aliens at their own game. They have been doing this for thousands of years. But we can show them something they have never seen before. We show them how humans actually fight. President Garrett nodded slowly. What exactly do you propose? Morrison looked around the room at all the military leaders. We give them 3 demonstrations. Naval combat that shows tactical deception, ground warfare that shows adaptive strategy, and personal combat that shows pure human determination. We prove that being the biggest or strongest or most advanced does not matter if you cannot think on your feet. The president thought about this for a long moment. Then he smiled. Do it. You have 4 weeks to prepare. Show these aliens why humanity survived on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. Show them why we are ready for the stars. Morrison saluted and felt hope rising in his chest. Earth had one chance to prove itself. One chance to join the galactic community or be left behind. But he had a plan now. And he had faith in the men and women who would carry it out. The observers were coming. And they had no idea what humans were capable of. The alien ship appeared in Earth's orbit exactly 3 weeks before the scheduled demonstration. It was massive and shaped like a crystal that had been stretched and twisted into impossible angles. The hull reflected sunlight in colors that human eyes had never seen before. Every telescope and satellite on Earth turned to watch as it settled into a high orbit above the Atlantic Ocean. Lieutenant Brandon, Philip stood on the landing pad at Andrews Air Force Base and tried not to look nervous. He was 26 years old and had been in the military for only 4 years. Now he was about to meet actual aliens. The brass had chosen him as liaison officer because he spoke 6 languages and had a degree in xenobiology. But standing here waiting for them to arrive, he felt completely unprepared. A shuttle detached from the massive ship above and began descending through the atmosphere. It made no sound and left no trail. It simply appeared in the sky above the base and settled onto the landing pad like a leaf falling from a tree. The hull was smooth and perfect without any visible seams or windows. A door opened in the side of the shuttle, and 3 aliens stepped out onto Earth soil for the first time. The first one made Brandon take a step backward before he could stop himself. It stood almost 8 feet tall on 6 legs that bent in ways that looked wrong. Its body was covered in dark green armor that looked like insect shell but moved like skin. 4 arms extended from its upper body and each one ended in sharp claws. Its head was triangular with multiple eyes arranged in a pattern that let it see in all directions at once. When it breathed, Brandon could hear a clicking sound from somewhere inside its chest. This was Ambassador Krelnoth from the Chiton Collective. Brandon had read the briefing files, but seeing the creature in person was completely different. Krelnoth moved with the confidence of a predator that had never known fear. Its species had conquered 12 star systems through military force alone. The second alien was stranger in a different way. It looked like a being made entirely of crystal or glass. Light passed through its body and created rainbow patterns on the ground. It had a roughly humanoid shape, but floated a few inches above the landing pad without any visible means of support. Its face was smooth except for 2 dark spaces that might have been eyes. When it spoke, the sound came from everywhere and nowhere at once. This was strategist Velmara. Its species had maintained peace in the galactic core for over 10,000 years. through superior technology and overwhelming firepower. They believed that war was a mathematical problem that could be solved with enough advanced weapons. The third alien looked almost normal compared to the other two. It stood on two legs and had two arms like a human, but its skin was covered in dark red scales that overlapped like armor plating. Its eyes were yellow with vertical slits for pupils. A long tail extended behind it for balance. Sharp teeth filled its mouth and steam came from its nostrils when it breathed. It moved with the grace of a trained fighter. This was Commander Thexelos from the Saurian Empire. His people prized individual combat ability above everything else. Every member of their species trained as a warrior from birth. They respected only strength and skill. Brandon saluted and tried to keep his voice steady. "Welcome to Earth. I am Lieutenant Brandon Phillips. I will be your liaison officer during your stay here." Krelnoth made a sound like stones grinding together. The translation device on Brandon's collar turned it into words. "You are small. All humans are this small?" "Yes, sir," Brandon said. "Our species averages between 5 and 6 feet in height." "Weak," Krelnoth said. "Slow breeding cycle. Soft skin, no natural weapons. How did you survive long enough to develop civilization?" Brandon felt anger flash through him but kept his face neutral. "We adapted, sir. We learned to use tools and work together." Velmara's voice echoed around them. "We have reviewed your military technology. You still use chemical propellants for most weapons. Your energy weapons are primitive. Your defensive shields are non-existent. By what measure do you consider yourselves ready for galactic warfare?" "That is what we are here to show you," Brandon said. "If you will follow me, Admiral Morrison is waiting to begin your tour of our facilities." The tour lasted all day, and Brandon could feel the aliens' disappointment growing with each stop. At the Air Force demonstration, Krelnoth watched human pilots flying jet fighters and made clicking sounds of dismissal. They moved through atmosphere only. What use is this in space combat? At the Navy shipyard, Velmara examined the railgun systems on a destroyer and calculated their energy output. "Kinetic weapons. Inefficient. Our plasma cannons deliver 3 times this destructive force with half the energy consumption." At the Marine training facility, Thexelos watched soldiers running obstacle courses and practicing hand-to-hand combat. He challenged one of the instructors to a sparring match and defeated him in less than 30 seconds. "Your warriors are weak. They rely on weapons because their bodies are inadequate." By evening, Brandon was exhausted and frustrated. The aliens had criticized everything they saw. They had found humanity lacking in every category. He escorted them to their quarters in a specially prepared facility and was glad when the door finally closed. Between them, he went straight to Admiral Morrison's office and found Captain Katie Sullivan already there. She was an intelligence officer who had been analyzing everything the aliens said and did. "They hate us," Brandon said as he collapsed into a chair. "They think we are primitive and weak." Morrison smiled slightly. "Good, that is exactly what we want them to think." Brandon looked confused. "Sir?" Katie pulled up a holographic display showing recordings from the day's tour. "Watch their body language. Listen to what they are really saying. They are not just dismissing us. They are dismissing us using very specific criteria." She played a clip of Krelnoth examining a tank. He criticizes the armor thickness but does not consider mobility. He assumes warfare is about direct force versus force. Another clip showed Velmara reviewing satellite defense systems. She calculates firepower ratios but does not consider tactical positioning or deception. She thinks battles are mathematical equations. A third clip showed Thexelos watching a boxing match. He judges individual combat ability but does not understand team tactics or combined arms. He thinks war is about personal strength. Morrison stood and walked to the window. Every single alien species in the Galactic Council fights the same way their biology dictates. Krelnoth's people swarm enemies with numbers and natural weapons. Velmara's species builds bigger guns and shoots from a distance. Thexulos's warriors challenge each other to single combat. They have been doing this for so long that they cannot imagine any other way to fight. "But we fight differently," Katie said. "We are not the strongest or fastest or most advanced. So we learn to cheat. We learn to improvise. We learn to turn every disadvantage into an advantage." Brandon began to understand. "So when they see our primitive weapons and weak soldiers, they think we are easy to beat." "Exactly," Morrison said. "And that gives us the element of surprise. The demonstration starts in 3 days. We are going to show them something they have never seen before. We are going to show them how humans actually fight when our survival is at stake." Katie brought up the schedule for the upcoming tests. First demonstration is naval combat in orbital space. Admiral Crawford has been planning something special. The aliens expect standard fleet formations and direct engagement. They are going to get something very different. Second demonstration is ground combat. Morrison continued. Sergeant Murphy and his team have been preparing. The scenario is brutal and the aliens expect us to lose, but Murphy does not know how to lose. And the third demonstration? Brandon asked. Morrison's smile grew wider. Personal combat. Thexulos wants to prove that humans are physically inferior. We are going to let him try. Brandon left the office feeling better than he had all day. The aliens thought they knew what to expect from humanity. They thought Earth's military would follow the same patterns as every other species in the galaxy. They had no idea that humans had spent thousands of years learning how to fight opponents that were bigger, stronger, and better armed. The demonstration would begin soon. And the galaxy was about to learn why humanity had survived on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. They were about to learn that being underestimated was the most dangerous mistake you could make when facing a human. The first demonstration took place in orbit above the moon, where Earth's naval forces had been training for the past 2 weeks. Admiral Lisa Crawford stood on the bridge of the UNS Defiance and watched the stars through the main viewport. She was 43 years old and had commanded ships for almost 20 years. She had fought in naval exercises across every ocean on Earth. But this was different. This was her chance to show the galaxy what human naval warfare really meant. Commander Nathan Wright walked up beside her carrying a data tablet. He was her executive officer and had helped plan every detail of what was about to happen. All ships report ready, Admiral. The simulation is loaded and waiting for your command. Crawford nodded and opened a communication channel to the rest of the fleet. 6 destroyers floated in space around the Defiance, each one equipped with railguns and missile systems. The crews had trained hard for this moment. They knew exactly what to do. This is Admiral Crawford to all ships. Remember what we practiced. Stay flexible, watch for my signals, and do not engage until I give the word. We are going to show these aliens something they have never seen before. The alien observers watched from a safe distance aboard their shuttle. Brandon had escorted them to the observation position, and now stood with them as they studied the human fleet. Krelnoth's multiple eyes tracked each ship while making clicking sounds of analysis. Velmara floated silently, but Crawford could see light patterns moving through its crystalline body as it calculated fleet positions. Thexulos simply watched with his arms crossed and a look that said he was not impressed. The simulation began with alarms blaring across all ships. A hostile fleet of 20 warships appeared on the tactical displays. They were attacking a civilian station that orbited on the far side of the moon. Earth's forces had to respond quickly and stop the attack while keeping the civilians safe. Crawford studied the tactical display and saw exactly what she expected. The enemy fleet was arranged in a standard formation. 3 heavy cruisers in front with destroyer screens on the flanks and support vessels in the rear. It was a textbook attack pattern, beautiful in its symmetry and completely predictable. Krelnoth spoke through the communication link to Brandon's translator. The enemy force is superior in numbers and firepower. Standard doctrine requires the human fleet to form defensive positions around the station and hold until reinforcements arrive. This is basic tactical procedure, Crawford smiled. Commander Wright, execute pattern Alpha. What happened next made all 3 alien observers lean forward in surprise. The human fleet did not move toward the station. Instead, it split into 3 separate groups. 2 destroyers broke away and began a wide, curving path that would take them around the moon using its gravity to accelerate. 3 more ships formed up and began burning hard directly toward the enemy fleet. The Defiance and 1 other destroyer seemed to simply disappear into the debris field left over from old satellite networks. Velmara's voice echoed with confusion. They are dividing their forces. This is tactically unsound. A divided fleet cannot concentrate firepower. They will be defeated in detail. Brandon said nothing, but he was grinning. He had seen the battle plans and knew what was coming. The 3 ships charging directly at the enemy fleet opened fire at maximum range. Railgun rounds streaked across space and missiles launched in waves. But Crawford had ordered them to aim poorly. Most of the shots missed. A few hit but caused minimal damage. It looked like a desperate and badly coordinated attack. Krelnoth made a sound like satisfaction. As expected, human weapons lack accuracy at range. The enemy will destroy this group easily and then move on to the station. The enemy fleet did exactly what Crawford wanted. They accelerated forward to engage the 3 human ships. Their formation tightened as they prepared to overwhelm the apparent frontal assault. Every enemy commander was focused on the threat in front of them. "Now," Crawford said quietly. The 2 destroyers that had curved around the moon came screaming out of their trajectory at incredible speed. The lunar gravity well had accelerated them beyond anything the enemy expected. They hit the rear of the enemy formation like hammers. Railgun fire tore into the lightly armored support vessels. Missiles found the engines of the heavy cruisers and crippled their ability to maneuver. At the same moment, the Defiance and her sister ship emerged from the debris field, where they had been hiding with all systems on silent running. They were already inside the enemy formation. Crawford's finger stabbed down on the firing control, and every weapon on both ships opened fire at point-blank range. The enemy command ship exploded first. Then 2 more cruisers lost their bridges to precision railgun strikes. The entire enemy formation fell apart in confusion. Ships collided with each other, trying to turn and face threats from multiple directions. The 3 human ships that had seemed to be making a desperate frontal assault suddenly showed their true purpose. They swept in from above and cut off any escape routes. In less than 4 minutes, the simulation was over. 15 enemy ships were destroyed or crippled. The remaining 5 were broadcasting surrender signals. The civilian station had not taken a single hit. Crawford's fleet had not lost a single vessel. The bridge of the Defiance erupted in cheers, but Crawford kept her face calm and professional. She opened a channel to the alien observers. "Simulation complete. All objectives achieved. Would the observers like to review our tactical approach?" There was a long silence before Krelnoth responded. His voice had lost its dismissive tone. "Explain. You divided your forces, which should have been fatal. You attacked with inferior numbers, which should have failed, yet you achieved total victory. How?" Commander Wright brought up a holographic replay of the battle and transmitted it to the alien shuttle. Admiral Crawford used a tactic called deception. The frontal assault was never meant to succeed. It was bait to draw the enemy into a trap. The enemy saw what they expected to see, Crawford added. A weaker force making a desperate attack. They focused on that threat and ignored everything else. The ships that went around the moon were our hammer. The ships hiding in the debris were our knife. The frontal group was just the hand waving to distract the target. Velmara's voice was different now, less certain, but this requires the enemy to make mistakes. What if they had not pursued the frontal assault? What if they had maintained formation discipline? Then we would have adapted, Crawford said simply. We had 6 different backup plans depending on how they responded. Human naval warfare has evolved through thousands of years of combat on Earth's oceans. We learned that victory does not go to the side with the biggest ships or the most firepower. It goes to the side that thinks faster and adapts better. Thexulo spoke for the first time since the simulation began. Your crews coordinated this without constant communication. How did each ship know when to act? Training, Commander Wright said. Every captain in this fleet has worked together for months. They know how Admiral Crawford thinks. They know how to read the tactical situation and respond appropriately. We call it disciplined initiative. Each ship can act independently but always toward the common goal. Brandon watched the alien observers and saw something he had not seen before. Respect. They were beginning to understand that human warfare was fundamentally different from anything in their experience. Krelnoth was quiet for a long time before speaking again. In 63 campaigns across the galaxy, I have never seen tactics like this. Every species fights according to their nature. The strong attack directly. The advanced use superior technology. The numerous overwhelm through mass. But you humans fight with deception and adaptation. You turn weakness into strength. That is because we had to, Crawford said. Humans are not the strongest species on Earth. We are not the fastest or the most dangerous. We survived by being smarter and more flexible than everything trying to kill us. We brought those lessons with us to space. The communication channel went silent and Crawford turned to her crew. Excellent work, everyone. Stand down from combat stations but maintain readiness. We have 2 more demonstrations to complete. As the human fleet began moving back to standard orbital positions, Brandon escorted the alien observers back to their quarters. They were quiet and thoughtful. Velmara kept running calculations as if trying to understand what had just happened. Krelnoth's eyes were constantly moving as he reconsidered his assumptions about human capabilities. Even Thexulo seemed less certain of his earlier dismissal. The first test was complete. Earth had shown the galaxy that human naval forces could defeat superior numbers through tactical creativity. But 2 more demonstrations remained. The real test was still ahead. The Nevada desert stretched out in all directions under the hot morning sun. Sergeant Chris Murphy stood on top of a concrete bunker and looked at the terrain through his binoculars. He was 32 years old with scars on his hands from a dozen combat zones across Earth. He had fought in mountains and jungles and cities, and now he was about to show 3 alien observers what real ground warfare looked like. The bunker behind him was designed to look like a defensive fortification protecting civilian evacuees. It had thick walls and gun positions and supply storage. The Galactic Council's simulation technology had created holographic enemy forces that would attack this position within the hour. Murphy and his team were supposed to hold the fortification against overwhelming odds. Corporal Lauren Davis climbed up beside him carrying her rifle. She was 28 and had spent 5 years fighting in urban environments. She knew how to use buildings and terrain better than anyone Murphy had ever worked with. The civilians are loaded into the transport vehicles. They will start evacuating as soon as the simulation begins. Good, Murphy said. He turned to look at the other 2 members of his team. Private Tyler Jackson was checking his communication equipment one more time. He was 24 and could coordinate chaos like a symphony conductor. Specialist Eric Sanders was loading explosive charges into his pack. He was 30 and had a gift for creative destruction that made Murphy both nervous and grateful. The alien observers arrived in their shuttle and took position on a hill overlooking the battlefield. Brandon stood with them and explained what they were about to see. The scenario is a defensive operation. Sergeant Murphy's team must protect civilian evacuees while holding against a hostile force 3 times their size. The simulation uses hard light holograms that can stun but not actually harm. Krelnoth studied the fortification with all his eyes. The defensive position is adequate. 4 soldiers cannot hold against superior numbers, but they may delay the enemy long enough for the civilians to escape. This is acceptable tactical doctrine. Velmara calculated probable outcomes. The bunker provides good cover and fields of fire. If the humans maintain discipline and conserve ammunition, they should last approximately 12 minutes before being overrun. Thexulos watched Murphy standing on top of the bunker. That one has the bearing of a warrior, but 4 against 12 is poor odds even for skilled fighters. They will be defeated. Murphy's radio crackled to life. Sergeant Murphy, this is command. The simulation will begin in 60 seconds. Good luck. Copy that command, Murphy said. Then he switched to his team frequency. Everyone knows the plan. Jackson, you are moving out first. Sanders, get into position. Davis, you are with the civilians. I will handle things here. Jackson grabbed his equipment and ran toward the enemy approach route. Sanders picked up his heavy pack and jogged toward an abandoned building, 200 meters outside the defensive perimeter. Davis moved to where the civilian transport vehicles were staged. All 3 of them left the fortification completely. Brandon saw this and looked confused. The alien observers made sounds of surprise. Krelnoth's clicking intensified. They are abandoning their defensive position before the battle even begins. This is madness. The simulation started with alarms blaring. 12 holographic enemy soldiers appeared at the far end of the valley and began advancing toward the bunker. They moved in a standard formation with covering fire and mutual support. It was textbook military doctrine, beautiful and predictable. Murphy watched them come and started remote firing the bunker's automated weapons. The guns made noise and shot at the enemy, but he was deliberately missing most of his targets. He wanted them to think the bunker was fully manned but poorly defended. The enemy force advanced exactly as he predicted. They focused all their attention on the fortification. 6 of them broke off to flank around the left side while the other 6 provided covering fire. It was what any competent force would do when attacking a prepared defensive position. Tyler Jackson waited behind a rock formation along the enemy's communication line. When the enemy soldiers passed his position, he activated a jamming device and then used a signal interceptor to tap into their communication network. Within seconds, he was listening to all their radio traffic. Then he started sending his own messages. Left flank unit, command says advance faster. Right flank unit, Command says hold position and wait for support. The enemy force started breaking apart as different units followed contradictory orders. Jackson kept talking in a voice that sounded official and urgent. Central command to all units, enemy reinforcements detected from the west. Reposition immediately. Half the enemy force turned to face a threat that did not exist. The other half kept advancing on the bunker. Their coordination fell apart completely. Sanders waited in the abandoned building with 30 pounds of explosives rigged throughout the structure. The building sat right in the path the enemy would use to flank the bunker. He watched through a broken window as 6 enemy soldiers entered the ground floor looking for a position to fire from. He waited until all of them were inside. Then he pressed the detonator. The building collapsed in a cloud of dust and debris. All 6 holographic soldiers disappeared as the simulation registered them as casualties. Sanders ran from his position and circled around toward the enemy's rear area. Davis had mixed in with the civilian evacuees disguised as a refugee. She wore civilian clothes and carried her weapon hidden in a bag. The transport vehicles began moving away from the fortification as planned. The enemy saw them leaving and sent 3 soldiers to intercept. They thought they were chasing helpless civilians. Davis waited until the enemy soldiers were right next to the lead vehicle. Then she dropped her disguise and came out firing. At close range with the element of surprise, she took down all 3 in seconds. The civilians kept moving toward safety while she provided cover. Murphy saw that the enemy force was now down to 3 soldiers from the original 12. They were confused and disorganized. Jackson was still feeding them false information. Sanders was somewhere behind them, causing more problems. Davis had protected the civilians. Murphy climbed down from the bunker and started walking toward the remaining enemy soldiers. He fired as he moved, using terrain for cover and never staying in one place long enough to be a target. The 3 enemy soldiers tried to coordinate a response, but Jackson was jamming their communications now. They could not talk to each other. One by one, Murphy eliminated them. The last soldier finally realized that the bunker had been empty the whole time, that the entire defensive position had been a decoy. But by then it was too late. The simulation ended with all enemy forces eliminated and all civilians evacuated safely. Murphy's team had taken 0 casualties. Total time elapsed was 18 minutes. The alien observers sat in stunned silence. Finally, Krelnoth spoke, and his voice was different than before. Explain what happened. You abandoned your defensive position. You scattered your forces. You violated every principle of sound military doctrine. Yet you achieved total victory. Murphy walked up the hill to where they sat. He was sweating and covered in dust, but he was smiling. We did not abandon anything. We never intended to hold that bunker. It was a trap. But your orders were to defend the position, Velmara said. Our orders were to protect the civilians and defeat the enemy, Murphy corrected. Nobody said we had to do it from inside a bunker. That fortification was bait. We let the enemy see what they expected to see, a defensive position that needed to be attacked. While they focused on that, we hit them from directions they were not watching. Thexulos leaned forward. This is deception. You do not fight with honor. We fight to win, Murphy said flatly. On Earth we have a saying. There is no such thing as a fair fight. There is only winning and losing. The enemy wanted to attack a fortified position, so we gave them one. Then we destroyed them while they were focused on it. Brandon explained further. Sergeant Murphy used multiple tactics simultaneously. Communications disruption, structural demolition, infiltration, and misdirection. Every member of his team operated independently but toward the common goal. Lauren Davis joined them on the hill. Human ground warfare evolved through thousands of years of fighting on every kind of terrain, against every kind of enemy. We learned that defending from a fixed position is usually how you lose. Movement and flexibility keep you alive. Tyler Jackson arrived next and added, We also learned that controlling information is as important as controlling ground. If the enemy does not know where you are or what you are doing, they cannot effectively fight you. Eric Sanders was the last to arrive, and we learned that sometimes the best defense is making the enemy's position completely untenable. That building took me 2 hours to rig properly, but it eliminated half their force in 1 second. Murphy looked at each of the alien observers. You judge our military by your standards. You look at our size and our weapons and you think we are weak. But you are measuring the wrong things. We are dangerous because we adapt. We are dangerous because we improvise. We are dangerous because we absolutely refuse to fight the way you expect us to. Krelnuth stood and walked closer to Murphy. The massive insectoid warrior towered over the human sergeant, but Murphy did not back away. In all my campaigns, I have never seen warriors fight like this. You turn every disadvantage into opportunity. That is what humans do, Murphy said. We survived on Earth by being more clever than animals that were bigger and stronger. We brought those survival skills with us when we learned to fight each other. And now we are bringing them to space. The second demonstration was complete. Earth had proven that human ground forces could defeat superior numbers through unconventional tactics and adaptive thinking. But one final test remained, and it would be the most personal of all. The final demonstration took place in a training facility at Fort Bragg, where hand-to-hand combat instructors taught soldiers how to fight when everything else failed. Private Melissa Grant stood in the center of the padded fighting area and stretched her muscles one last time. She was 26 years old and stood 5 feet 4 inches tall. She weighed 130 pounds. For the past 6 years, she had studied every martial art she could find and had become one of the best close combat instructors in the entire military. Today, she was going to fight Commander Thexelos. The alien warrior stood on the opposite side of the fighting area and looked at her with what might have been amusement. He was 7 feet tall and covered in thick red scales that looked like natural armor. His muscles rippled under his skin with a power that no human could match. His claws were retracted, but everyone could see them. His tail swayed behind him for balance. He had fought in single combat hundreds of times and never lost. Admiral Morrison stood with the other observers on a raised platform overlooking the fighting area. He looked worried, and Brandon could understand why. This seemed like a terrible mismatch. Melissa was brave, but she was also human. Thexulos was a predator species that had evolved for combat. Krelnoth clicked thoughtfully. This is unwise. The human female will be injured. Possibly killed. Thexulos is a warrior of the highest rank. He has defeated opponents twice her size. Private Grant volunteered. Morrison said quietly. She knows what she is doing. Vilmara's light patterns showed calculation. The physical disparity is too great. Strength, speed, natural weapons, and armor all favor the Saurian. The probability of human victory is less than 3%. Morrison said nothing, but Brandon noticed he was gripping the railing very tightly. The referee was a neutral Marine officer who explained the rules. This is unarmed combat. No weapons of any kind. The fight continues until one participant yields or is unable to continue. Medical staff are standing by. Fighters, are you ready? Melissa nodded and settled into a relaxed stance. She looked calm and focused. Thexulos bared his teeth in what passed for a smile among his species. He clearly thought this would be over quickly. The referee stepped back. Begin. Thexulos moved first, and he was fast. Faster than Brandon expected. He closed the distance in 2 long strides and swung one clawed hand at Melissa's head, with enough force to knock out a horse. But Melissa was not there anymore. She had stepped to the side at the last possible moment, and Thexulos's strike hit only air. His momentum carried him forward, and Melissa drove her elbow into his ribs as he passed. The blow would have broken bones on a human, but Thexulos's scales absorbed most of the impact. He spun around and lashed out with his tail. The heavy appendage would have swept Melissa's legs out from under her, but she jumped over it and landed in a crouch. Thexulos charged again, and this time tried to grab her with both hands. Melissa did not try to match his strength. Instead, she used his own force against him. As his hands reached for her, she grabbed one of his wrists, turned her body, and used a hip throw that sent him tumbling across the mat. It was basic judo, but perfectly executed. Thexulos rolled and came back to his feet immediately. He was not smiling anymore. The fight continued, and Brandon began to understand what he was watching. Melissa was not trying to overpower Thexulos because she could not. She was not trying to trade blows with him because she would lose. Instead, she was fighting smart. Every time he attacked, she redirected his force. Every time he tried to use his strength, she moved to positions where strength did not matter. Every time he expected her to be defensive, she struck at vulnerable points. She hit his joints where scales met, and movement required flexibility. She struck at his eyes and throat. She swept his legs when he was off balance. She used his own momentum to throw him repeatedly, And most importantly, she never stopped moving. Thexulos was stronger and tougher, but Melissa was making him work for every attack. She was wearing him down. 3 minutes into the fight, Thexulos was breathing hard. His attacks were becoming wilder and less controlled. He was frustrated because nothing he tried was working. The small human kept slipping away from his strikes and hitting him in places that hurt. His ribs ached. His left eye was swelling shut. One of his knees was throbbing from a vicious low kick. Melissa circled him and looked for an opening. She had trained for this moment her entire adult life. She knew that size and strength were advantages, but they were not everything. Skill mattered, technique mattered, and most of all, the willingness to do whatever it took to survive mattered. Thexulos roared and charged one more time. He had abandoned all technique now and was simply trying to catch her through brute force. Melissa waited until he was committed to his attack. Then she dropped low and drove her fist into his extended knee with all her weight behind it. Something cracked. Thexulos stumbled. Melissa rolled behind him and jumped on his back. Her arm wrapped around his thick neck in a chokehold that cut off blood flow to his brain. Thexulos tried to throw her off, but she held on. He tried to claw at her, but she kept her body positioned where his arms could not reach. He tried to slam her against the ground, but she absorbed the impact and maintained the hold. Slowly, his struggles weakened. His vision started going dark. For the first time in his life, Thexulos felt what it was like to lose. He tapped the mat 3 times, the signal for surrender. Melissa immediately released him and stepped back. Thexulos collapsed to his hands and knees, gasping for air. Medical staff rushed forward, but he waved them away. Slowly, he stood and faced the small human who had just defeated him. There was a long moment of silence. Then Thexulos did something that shocked everyone. He lowered his head in a gesture of respect. "You are a true warrior. I have fought beings 3 times your size with less skill. How did you learn to fight like this?" Melissa was breathing hard, but she managed to speak clearly. "On Earth, we are not the biggest or strongest species. For millions of years, we competed against animals that could kill us easily. We survived by developing techniques that let us fight opponents who had every physical advantage. We created martial arts specifically because we needed to overcome superior force with superior skill." Morrison came down from the observation platform and walked to where they stood. "Private Grant represents something important about humanity. We do not accept limitations. When we face an enemy that is stronger, we become more skilled. When we face an enemy that is faster, we become more clever. When we face an enemy that is better armed, we become more adaptive. We refuse to lose because losing means extinction." The 3 alien observers came down as well. They looked at Melissa with new understanding. Krelnoth spoke first, and his voice held genuine respect. "I have underestimated your species from the beginning. I saw small, weak creatures with primitive weapons. I did not see survivors who had clawed their way to the top of a death world through determination and intelligence." Velmara's light patterns showed something that might have been admiration. "Your military doctrine is unlike anything in the galaxy. You do not rely on natural advantages or technological superiority. You rely on adaptation and creativity. Every battle we have observed showed the same pattern. You assess the situation, identify weaknesses, and exploit them without hesitation." Thexulos rubbed his neck where Melissa's arm had choked him. "I came to Earth believing that warrior spirit was about physical prowess and individual strength. But this human showed me something different. She fought with intelligence and technique. She turned my every advantage against me. This is the mark of a true warrior." The 3 observers stepped back and spoke among themselves in their own languages for several minutes. Finally, they turned to face Morrison and the assembled human leadership. Krelnoth spoke for all of them. "We came to Earth to evaluate whether your military meets Galactic Council standards. We expected to find a primitive species with outdated weapons and inadequate tactics. We were wrong. Your naval forces demonstrated tactical creativity that surpasses anything we have seen in conventional galactic warfare. Your ground forces showed adaptive strategy that would revolutionize planetary combat. Your individual warriors possess skills that compensate for physical limitations through training and determination." Velmara continued. "The galaxy has fought the same way for thousands of years. We rely on our natural advantages and superior technology. Our enemies know this and have adapted to counter our strengths. But humans fight differently. You are unpredictable. You improvise. You refuse to follow doctrine when doctrine does not serve you. This makes you dangerous to any enemy and valuable to any ally." Thexulos finished the assessment. "Earth's military is ready for the stars." "More than ready." The Galactic Council needs what humanity can offer. We need your tactical flexibility. We need your adaptive thinking. We need warriors who understand that victory comes from intelligence and determination, not just force. The verdict is unanimous. We recommend immediate acceptance of Earth into the galactic community. Morrison felt relief and pride wash over him. He saluted the alien observers. On behalf of Earth and humanity, we accept your invitation. We look forward to serving alongside our galactic allies. 6 months passed quickly after that day. Captain Nicole Hayes was promoted to commander and given leadership of the first human deep space tactical unit. Sergeant Murphy became an instructor teaching alien ground forces how to think creatively about combat. Private Grant traveled to 3 different alien worlds demonstrating human martial arts. Admiral Crawford commanded joint human-alien naval exercises that introduced new tactical concepts to galactic warfare. And slowly, the galaxy began to change. Human officers serving with alien forces brought new ideas about flexibility and adaptation. Human diplomatic negotiators, trained through centuries of complex international relations, helped resolve conflicts that had been deadlocked for years. Human scientists collaborated with alien researchers and made breakthroughs that neither species could have achieved alone. The Galactic Council's vote to admit humanity was not just about adding another military to their alliance. It was about introducing a completely different way of thinking. Earth had proven that the most dangerous species was not the one with the biggest weapons or the strongest warriors. It was the one that refused to quit, adapted to any challenge, and turned every disadvantage into an opportunity. Humanity had survived for millions of years on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. They had learned lessons that no other species in the galaxy understood, and now they were sharing those lessons with the stars. The galaxy would never be the same.